Hello and welcome back everyone to another exciting episode of AnubhavTrainings.com. In this series of videos, we are going to learn about how to integrate ChatGPT with SAP BTP and SAP S4HANA. ChatGPT is one of the hottest topic in recent days. It's a artificial intelligence powered by chat bot, which allows you to ask real-time questions in natural languages and reply you the answers and the relevant information. It can be used to generate articles, news articles. It can be generated to solve your problems, generate source code, and many more things. It is very powerful. So it is also provided by OpenAI Foundation. So we will be utilizing ChatGPT for integrating with S4HANA and BTP. Before we get into that, let's talk about our scenario. What will be our scenario for this integration? And then we will discuss about the required setup in today's episode. In subsequent episode, I will show you how to do the end-to-end integration with exchange of information between SAP BTP, S4HANA and ChatGPT. So first of all, let's go ahead and look at the introduction of our scenario. What is the business requirement here from the business standpoint of view? So our requirement is to basically send a automated email to our customers about the status of their sales order. So what happens is there is a customer who created a purchase order quite a while ago with our company. And today the customer have sent us the email or requesting an information through the phone call about his purchase order. So the input here from the customer will be the purchase order ID. Corresponding to that, we have a sales order information in our SAP S4HANA system. So first of all, when a customer sends you a text message or a mail, the first step is to extract his purchase order ID from the detailed text. So in the step number 1, we will use the ChatGPT to extract the purchase order ID provided by customer and also the customer last name. Then the next step, based on this purchase order ID, we are going to call our SAP S4HANA system. And in the S4HANA system, we are going to query the information about the corresponding sales order of this purchase order. So we pass the purchase order ID and get the sales order information in real time with the status. Now you know that if the sales order status is A, which means none of the items are yet delivered. We will give this information again to ChatGPT to basically generate a beautiful email for us out of the box by providing the customer name, customer sales order ID, and the status. Finally, once the mail performa is generated by ChatGPT, we are going to send this automated email using mail task. This entire orchestration will be carried out into SAP BTP. And we will be utilizing SAP BTP workflow capability to do this entire orchestration. Cool. So in today's session, first I'm going to show you what are all the prerequisites required to be able to perform this entire integration in the system. So first of all, we need to set up our API key for ChatGPT platform. That is our first step. So I'm going to go back to the step number 1, which is the platform.openai.com. I will put all these setup instructions in the description of this YouTube video. You guys can also go and follow the same. So first we go to the OpenAI platform. And this is the OpenAI platform homepage, openai.com. And there we can go to the platform main page to generate an API key. So an API key will allow you to programmatically interact with the ChatGPT. So when you go to chat.openai.com, the ChatGPT will open here. But here as a human, you can interact. But if you want To interact with the ChatGPT programmatically, you need an API. To integrate with their API, we need to generate the API key. So we go to developers, we can go to API reference, examples, and documentation. So when you go to here, it will show you the introduction. You can also read this introduction about everything, including the API documentation, how you call the APIs. Of course, I will show you at a later point of time how to make a call to this API. But first of all, we need to generate the API key. So we come to the OpenAI platform, and then I go to my user ID and say view API key. And now I create a new API key. Let's say YouTube or Anubhav. Click on create. I copy this API key, and now I'm going to call the ChatGPT through the API. So for that, again, you go to API reference and you can see there is an API. There are multiple APIs. So you see there's an API called api.openai.com/v1/chat completions. So we can trigger this API by passing authorization as bearer and the API key which we just generated. Yes, that's a key. So let me go back to my Postman tool and create a new collection, Postman collection over here. Let me close everything. And I create a new Postman collection. This collection also I will share with all of you. Please check the description of this video where you will find this entire Postman collection to simulate these APIs. So let's create a new collection. And I say Anubhav trainings, chat GPT S4 scenario. Now, in this first we will add a request. It should be testing ChatGPT. That is the first step what we will be doing. Yes. And now let's move on. So now we go to the documentation and refer the documentation. And as per the documentation, you can see we can trigger this API. I will copy, and we need to add authorization as bearer. So let me just choose the bearer token and pass the API key over here, which we just generated. In addition to that, it should be a post request to this particular URL. Remember, I will be sharing also this entire Postman collection with you. Please check the description of this video. So then I will go to the headers and the body. So in the body, we will add a JSON body. So first I will show you how to manually send instructions to ChatGPT. So we can just go back to ChatGPT and we say, hey ChatGPT, can you do something for me? Maybe I would request ChatGPT to write a email to my manager requesting a week vacation for travel to India. So that is something which I can request to ChatGPT. I got to refresh quickly to send a request, and ChatGPT is going to write. Oh, I'm sorry. So write a letter or write an email to my manager requesting for 2 days or a week holiday for vacation to India. So that's what ChatGPT does. You can see it is then writing a email, you can see, for me. So that is exactly what ChatGPT is capable of. For example, this is just one example. There could be lots of examples. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to test the same via the API. So I will copy this text and straight ahead go to Postman tool, and we are going to paste the API payload based on the documentation. So documentation helps me to call the API where I need to pass this information into the payload, and I will pass here the text what I gave it to the chat GPT, and I trigger this request with the API key, And you would see that the ChatGPT is going to respond back with the same email content as a reply based on the input. You can see it has written the email for me automatically. So that is the beauty of the API. Let me save this call to my Postman collection. So this is step number 1, where you can input something to ChatGPT and it is going to give you the response. Now I'm going to duplicate this call and I will try to orchestrate, extract customer purchase order number from an incoming text. That is my next use case. So for that, I'm going to now pass this particular text to the ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT to prepare a JSON based on the purchase order number passed by the customer. That's what I want to do. So here is the text I give to the ChatGPT. So customer send me a message. Anubhav, please confirm me the status of my purchase order, the number. Regards, Sonia. So I'm asking ChatGPT to please convert this simple text into a JSON where give me the extract for me the purchase order number and the name. So we click on send again and ChatGPT is going to respond back with a JSON. There you go. This is my JSON data. Perfect. Once I got the purchase order number and the name of the customer, we are then going to call our S4HANA system. So that is our next step, to prepare a payload in the S4HANA system to call the S4HANA system with this purchase order number and get the data. So for that, we will first explore the API provided by SAP on extracting to get the sales order number, for extracting sales order number. So we go to api.sap.com to find the relevant API. So that is our step number 2. Based on the PO number. So now I'm going to come back to S4HANA and I go to APIs and I search for sales order. S4HANA package and then search for the API. There it is. There is an API provided by SAP in the S4HANA system to extract the sales order information, and we can check the API reference and the basic documentation as well. So I open the documentation. This is the name of the API. Let me cross check if this is activated in my S4HANA system or not. So I will just go ahead and log into my SAP S4HANA system. I will go to main service transaction code and then check if this API is registered or not. And the good news is the API is ready and it is available and registered also. So as a next step, we are going to invoke this API from the Postman tool. So let me just copy the API address. And we are going to get the sales order information corresponding to purchase order. So I will create a new call, new request. And we will just save this request to our collection and about ChatGPT scenario and name it as get sales order data by PO. So customer send me a purchase order number. We are going to get the sales order information from this API. So this API also offers an entity set. Let me just check the entity set name. It is called a sales order. So we are going to call this entity set to the system. And of course, I need to now pass the authorization to this API, my ABAP user ID password. And then we are just going to pass a bit of filters. So when you look at this, you can also check the maybe just top 1 record with a filter. So basically what am I doing? I'm getting the top 1 record passing the purchase order by customer. So this is the number which Sonia provided me for her purchase order. Format will be JSON, descending order, and we will fetch the sales order ID, sold to party, purchase order by customer, and the overall status. When we make this call wow, the S4HANA system returns me the API information, the information of the purchase order, which was created by customer, and the corresponding sales order number and the status. So this is the status I need to send back as a response email to the customer. So you see it's not D. The E means it's still pending. None of the items are yet delivered to the customer. It was accepted, approved, but not yet delivered. So not D. So what I do next is I ask ChatGPT to basically prepare an email to send to customer based on this JSON input data. So we will write a text to ChatGPT. We will inform ChatGPT, hey ChatGPT, can you please also generate an email for me where I would want to give a status update to the customer. So I go back to ChatGPT and I will now ask, write an email to convert this JSON into a meaningful text, keeping in mind the customer asked for their purchase order status. If the return status is A, which means the item is not yet delivered. If the status is D, means all the items are delivered. This information is coming from SAP and customer name is Sonia with the best regards S4HANA team. So now I'm going to copy and paste this entire JSON payload, what we have, right away into ChatGPT. And let's see what ChatGPT is capable of. There you go. Dear Sonia, thank you for reaching out to S4HANA team regarding the status of your purchase order. After checking the SAP system, we found that purchase order ID with this has an overall status as A, which means none of the items are yet delivered. We would like to assure you the team is closely monitoring the delivery process and doing everything to ensure that your items are delivered as soon as possible. We understand the importance of timely delivery and keep you updated on any changes. Wow, looks like written by human, right? So that's the power of ChatGPT, where it auto-generates this email for us. And of course, the same I'm going to invoke it via the API. So our next step will be to duplicate this call and call ChatGPT once again with the bearer token to generate the email. So we are going to pass here the text which I just copied to ChatGPT. Perfect. So that is the email which computer is going to generate, ChatGPT is going to generate. So these are the sequence of calls which will simulate our entire scenario and finally trigger this email in a automated way to the customer. So we set up the ChatGPT key, we tested our API, we set up the API from SAP S4HANA system. Our next stop will be to set up the BTP account in today's episode to actually go ahead and use the BTP workflow to trigger these sequence of calls in an automated way. Yes, currently we learn the process manually and then we'll do automation. Now, the next thing which I would like to do is also copy the call which I just made into the slide. That's our sales order API. So that in case when you're using your company system, you can just replace the host name and port number, and then the same will work if the service is active. So our next step will be to go ahead and create the BTP workflow subscription with the booster. So I'm going to come back, and over here we are going to start a booster. So you see in my BTP account, I go to boosters to basically set up my BTP workflow subscription. So here in the BTP account, we will be able to trigger a booster to set up all the required services required to start the BTP workflow. So I just go to SAP BTP subscription. Remember, I'm using the trial account here. So you all can practice everything what I'm showing in these episodes directly without spending a single penny, and build an ultimate scenario for your company as well. So I start the BTP workflow management booster, which is going to configure everything for us in our system. So it is going to assign quotas, subscribe to SAP BTP process management application, create SAP BTP workflow service instance, create all the required destinations for the cross connection, and also assign the role to my user to be able to use the BTP cockpit to develop our workflow. That is how exactly the entire stuff is going to work. So that comes to the end of our today's episode. For setup up part, we have settled up everything, which is what will be the ammunition to build our scenario. In our next episode of this series, I'm going to take you to the system and develop our first two steps of the BTP workflow to communicate with ChatGPT and extract the detail of S4HANA sales order. So that is what we will do in the next episode, and then in subsequent episode we will learn complete end-to-end development and triggering the mail process for our customer. Once again, thank you so much for joining this episode. If you think this video series is helping you, please like, share, and subscribe this video. Smash the bell icon so that you get notified when we will release the next video on our channel. With that, Anubhav signing out. Thank you so much and catch you up in the next session.